So the first yeast that we ever caught was off of a Cherokee rose that we planted in the backyard for gin. So originally the botanical gardens had this wonderful arbor that had a Cherokee rose, which is the state flower. And those things, if you've never seen one, they are brutal and amazing and crazy invasive a little bit. But they grow gigantic. And so we would go hang out and have picnics under that. And one year we went and they cut the thing to the ground. And they just got rid of it. And Jen was sad. She was like, that's crazy. She loved it. So then me and Hayden spent the better part of 2 years trying to find one that we could buy. But ironically, in the state of Georgia, finding a Cherokee rose to plant is next to impossible because nobody wants to plant them because they were super hard. So time after time that was in Winterville, ended up getting one. We finally found it. And then he had to do an agricultural project at school when he was in middle school, so we built her like a pergola where we could grow this rose on, and now this thing is, I just had to prune it back, and I think at its biggest beautiful. It was 70 feet in diameter and 30 feet high, well maybe 20 feet high with like 30-foot runners, and just massive and amazing and beautiful. So when I was teaching beer history class, I got interested in pre-Louis Pasteur fermentation, which he's the guy that discovered yeast and pasteurization for beer and wine. But before him, everything was wild ferment. So you had stuff that you passed around. This was back when women were doing all the work pre-1876. So every one of our great-grandmothers had like this giant crock or tub that she would make soda out of. So Coke, Pepsi, root beer, all of those were soda recipes that kids drank early, but then adults drank them when they fermented out fully. So it's a 7-day fermentation cycle. Getting into that, I was like, man, that would be so cool. Like, if you look at beer styles like alt beer in Dusseldorf, or Kolsch beer in Cologne, or Helles in Munich, or IPAs in Burton-on-Trent in England, like these all developed because local yeasts got used to doing something, and they were just local. So that's why different beers from different towns were better. I was like, man, Athens is this amazing town. Like, what if we could catch a wild yeast in Athens? So we caught that over there, beautiful banana pudding kind of notes. Took us forever to isolate it and turn it into something that made beer. And then before we cleared this property, we caught yeast off of a wild azalea plant. It was about 10 feet higher than we are now because we had to clear all this land out. We spent 2 hours trying to find it, and then the head of microbiology at Athens Tech is the guy that found it. I was like, this sucks. Like, I'm scratched up. I'm hot. I got ticks on me. Like, I don't think we're going to find anything. He was like, there's a wild azalea behind you. And I turned around, it was like this little Dr. Seuss wild azalea and this little sunbeam. It was the state wildflower and the state flower that we ended up catching yeast off of that ended up working out.
And you take the flower, right? Uh-huh. And you put it in the wort itself, right?
Yeah. And we have 87 yeasts now that are frozen at UGA, and we're working on doing the genetics on them because yeast make a lot of stuff. We want to make sure they don't make like pathogenic material or something that would be bad for people. And it's kind of like this, I just met cool people. I spent a long time building that network up, and I wanted to learn as much as possible because I was curious. And so I ended up with like 32 scientists on this cool panel, and they all love to drink beer. And then we honed it down because some of them just love to drink beer and they didn't really care about coming out here and working all that much. So we honed it down to about 5 or 6 people, and then we kind of ran with it. But there's an amazing woman named Duda who is Greek but grew up in England, and she spent 4 years traveling Europe trying to catch the original beer yeast strains that were wild, that ended up being tamed and turned into all the beer styles of Europe. So I think she has 274 yeast strains that are beer yeast strains. Ours are not beer yeast strains. None of them are. Hers are all beer yeast strains, I think. She moved to Athens, Georgia, because we're in the right climate for her to do it. So here's this phenomenal woman who's all she wants to do is go back to like the beginning of beer history and brew beers with those yeasts. So when she found about us, she was super excited because she was like, wow, these people are dumb enough to do this. Like, we literally could take these yeasts and figure out how they taste. These wild yeasts that we know are going to make beer, hopefully, and let's see what they do. But what she wants to do is break them out and do their genetic mapping so that you could look at the map and say, oh, this one's going to taste like bananas, and that one's going to be sour, and this one's going to be, and it's going to attenuate alcohol, and that one's going to make really bad stuff. So we can bypass this 2-year thing that you have to go through to get to that point. So wild yeasts are like
Do you need help?
Mutts.
Okay.
And purebred dogs are like commercial yeast. So a Great Dane is always going to look like a Great Dane, and it's only going to live for as long as a Great Dane lives. You know, Chihuahua's good for Chihuahua stuff. But you wouldn't cross their job. So you wouldn't take a Great Dane on a plane and sit it in your lap, and you wouldn't take a Chihuahua and guard some big building for the most part. Because it wouldn't work. Same thing with yeast. Like, you wouldn't take a German Hefeweizen yeast and try to make an IPA because it would suck. It would taste like banana IPA. Or you wouldn't take an English IPA yeast and then try and brew some complex Belgian style beer with it because it's pretty neutral yeast. It's very hop tolerant, and you'd be going the opposite direction. But wild yeast is like that weird dog you saw at the pound where you're like, that even looks like a wolf.
Are you looking for some
like,
more
is that
containers?
Is that a wolf? And then you're like, no, I don't think it's a wolf. So you have to bring it home, and you have to let it tear your stuff up and poop in the house. You got to figure out if you can train it. What's it going to eat? Is it nice? Is it good around kids? Is it going to eat your furniture? Is it super cuddly at night? Which would be amazing. So we run our yeast through all those processes, and when we figure out where they're at, then we let them be them. But we also try to train them a little bit. So we try to say, hey, what if you could taste like a Bavarian Hefeweizen, or what if you could become more hop tolerant? Like, maybe you're scrappy enough that that's good for you. So our wild azalea yeast, we do our Berliner on it, and it produces all this beautiful acidity and peach, mango, papaya esters, which are impossible to get. If you put peaches in there, it's impossible to get those fruity flavors. And then the second time we do it, we put it on sour stout, so it loses some of the acidity, but it still has a lot of that rounded, fruity quality to it. And then the third time we use it, we do wild azalea saison, and it's more phenolic and spicy because it's completely lost interest in making anything else. So we're training it to make ethanol every time we use it, so we can only use it about 4 times. And the 4th time we use it to make azalea IPA, so it has these beautiful, somewhat fruity estery compounds, but pretty good on hops. And then by that point in time, it's been on hops enough that we've taught it to be tolerant of hops. But Cherokee Rose yeast, she's a different kettle of fish. Like, she doesn't like hops very much. She's a little more hard to start. And that's the thing about yeast. Yeast is all female. It's just cloning itself. So you start with one cell. We literally start with a colony from a plate, and then it just clones itself. So if yeast starts doing a new trick, then whatever that trick is, when that yeast clones itself, that's what it does. And so if that yeast survives, then all of a sudden your beer could go from being banana-like to being peach-like. And you've got to figure out how to make that yeast happy, and it's sometimes really tough. Like, it's like feeding a baby, basically. I only understand things through metaphor and simile.